I anticipated a number with a 2 in front, to be honest, Sean. I thought that particularly after the succession of gaffes and just, avoidable mistakes that David Cunliffe had made, and which occurred right in the middle of this polling cycle. So it didn't really surprise me, but my suspicion is it'll get worse.
What?
Yep.
How?
I think as a combination of factors sets in, the first would be the kind of spiral of silence effect, which political scientists have, studied for many years now, which basically boils down to people talking amongst themselves, hear their friends, their neighbours, their workmates saying that, oh no, that party's finished, it can't possibly win, and it gathers a kind of momentum, and people, in a sense, buy into that argument, even if it means going against a party they've supported for many years. It may not mean that they vote for another party, but the most likely outcome is that they won't vote at all. And of course, that's exactly what Labor doesn't want to happen. But the other thing, I think, is a palpable sense of disappointment among those who were roused to enthusiasm by David Cunliffe, and as was exemplified in this same poll, where the last time they published these results, Labor was on 37.7, which was one of the highest scores it had received. Yep. So put those two factors together, and I think there's still a little bit further for Labor to fall.
Yeah. Well, one imagines, Matthew, you popping a champagne cork as you jump into the BMW. But in truth, is this much of a no contest good for the right?
Well, let's be very clear here. All MMP elections, with the exception of 1999, have been extremely close because a combination of parties can get the numbers and put together a government. And even if you go back to 2002, when Bill English led National to its 20.93% disaster, in the weeks leading up to that election, it was at least mathematically possible, according to the polls, that there could be a National Act, United Future, New Zealand First coalition. And so the prospects of a Labour-Green government still remain if they were then also supported by Wiz Peters. I think there is a risk, as Chris was saying, that Labor now just goes into a spiral of despair, everyone writes them off. But that could be to the Green Party's advantage. In this poll this morning, the Green Party is at a record high since the last election of, I think it's 13.1%. Now, if David Cunliffe takes Labor where Bill English took National in 2002, all the way down to 21%, which is possible, and let's say all that support goes to the Green Party, then you could imagine both Labor and the Greens would both get about 21%, which sums to 42, and with Winston Peters and maybe Hone Harawira, there's a possibility of a Labor-Green Harawira government, even under these numbers that we're seeing.
You're trying to scare Nats into actually voting, aren't you, Matthew?
Well, I'd be surprised for anyone to disagree with me that all MMP elections have come down to the wire, even in the last election.
I'd make the observation
lost by fewer than 10,000 votes.
I'd make the observation that no government has ever been formed without the highest polling party being the leader of that government or the majority party of that government.
We only have a short tradition of MMP, of proportional representation. Only goes back to 1996. You look at Germany, where they've had this system since after the Second World War. There have been many occasions where the silver and bronze medalists have formed a coalition to beat the gold medalist, and we shouldn't rule it out here. There's no reason to rule it out.
Okay. Well, it would be a very optimistic Politico who would try spinning this as anything but a disastrous poll result. The first major poll after the election date is announced. Chris Trotter, well, what do we blame it on? Is this the Cunliffe effect?
Well, it's very hard not to include David Cunliffe in the calculations. I think it'd be foolish not to. As I say, I think there's a substantial disappointment factor at work here. And I think what will happen is that the disappointment will result in abstentions. I was frankly astounded that so many months were allowed to pass in which virtually nothing happened. David Cunliffe, put in an amazing effort to win the leadership of the Labour Party and was rewarded, as I said before, with some very positive poll results. And then, if I may paraphrase Monty Python, all of a sudden nothing happens. Now, if it had been me, if I'd been sitting on those back benches, sort of keeping my ambitious fire alight, I would have been, I'd have been mapping out virtually hour by hour what I would do after I seized the leadership from those bastards sitting in front of me. And yet that doesn't seem to have figured in Cunliffe's thinking at all, because far too much time has elapsed. And I said to my good old friend Matt McCartan, when he was appointed, I said to him, Matt, you have got to impress upon David Cunliffe the urgency of explaining to Middle New Zealand why you are necessary, because otherwise the narrative will be lunatic lurch to the left.
Well, Matthew, the thing is, there are issues there, Matthew. There is the housing issue, which we're going to talk about on this show this morning. There are power prices. There are issues there that National is vulnerable on, and that could be, lightning rods for people to get out and vote against this government, vote the current government out.
Well, I've always thought that the so-called home affordability issue is a double-edged sword for Labor raising it, because if you say you're going to make houses cheaper in New Zealand, and particularly in Auckland, what you're also saying is you're going to make the value of everyone's existing home less. And there's about 2/3 of households in New Zealand, about 2/3 are owner-occupied, and about 1/3 are rented. So for Labor to say they're going to cut the value of the family home...
Yeah, but all it means is you'll get second division lotto, not first division lotto.
Well, frankly, there are people in this city who are mortgaged, and the idea that they would be put into negative equity by an effort to cut the value of property, I think is a terrible mistake. And perhaps that's come through, because I think one of the most alarming things in this poll for the Labour Party is its support in Auckland, which has plunged to a new low of 26.7%.
Yeah,
now, even in December, it was at 37% support, and leading into the last election, Labor was getting 41% support in Auckland. Now, David Cunliffe promised that he had this unique ability amongst his Labor Party peers, better than Shane Jones, better than Grant Robertson, better than David Shearer, to go out to South Auckland and West Auckland, to get on the back of a bus, get a microphone, and inspire the people of South and West Auckland to vote Labor. He has utterly failed. Labor has gone dramatically backwards in Auckland, and also amongst women. Labour normally does better amongst women than National. That has turned around. Currently, Cunliffe's support amongst women is down to 10%, lower than his support amongst men. I think they have to get rid of him. I think they made a mistake appointing him in the first place. And they're in a crisis, and they've got to respond to it.
All right. Do you think they will, Chris Trotter?
Oh, I think the logistics of changing the leader at this point are horrendous, because it's not simply, as it was in the olden days, a matter of the caucus people getting together and executing a leader quickly and cleanly. Now it would have to go out to the party again. I just can't see that happening. I think they're stuck with him now for the duration.
Man, it might be a blood sport covering this election, and it'll be Labour's blood. I thank you both for joining us this morning and for your prescience in recent weeks in terms of your political observations. Chris Trotter and Matthew Hooton just picking over the latest poll results